Alright, buddy, it's now or never. Here we go. I'm actually impressed. But without further delay, let's talk about how Pokémon Sword and Shield could be the best in the series. Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we're talking about how Pokémon Sword and Shield could be the best games in the series. We know Gamefreak is trying to accomplish just that. They've said they want these games to be the biggest and best games yet. But how can they accomplish that? Well, in my opinion, I think they have the advantage because the Nintendo Switch is the most powerful, most capable piece of hardware that a Pokemon game has ever been on, and we do know that this is the largest team, the largest budgeted Pokemon game yet. We've seen how over 1,000 people will be involved with this game. They've doubled their core development team since Sun and Moon. They are trying to make these games the best in the series. But how exactly will they accomplish that? Well, let's take a look at the different facets for this game and see how they could take it to that level. Let's start with the story. For most Pokemon games, the story isn't necessarily the most complicated. However, I do like it when there's a few twists and turns. There are some implications that go a little bit deeper than just beating the bad guy and everyone living happily ever after. And then having those circumstances sort of extend beyond the main campaign. One generation that comes to mind that a lot of people seem to really highlight as the strongest in the series for story is Generation 5 Pokemon Black and White. It had all of those elements. So for Sword and Shield, I think it should sort of match those elements. I want the game to have a campaign, a story that goes a little bit off the beaten track, has a few twists and turns that I do not see coming, and then I want some of the themes of this story to sort of be a little bit grander in scope, be more than just a crazy bad guy with no actual backstory or actual good reason to be the bad guy. And then whatever sort of events take place at the climax of the game, I hope that some of those events sort of lead into a secondary campaign or a post-game that have some lingering effects that give you even more reason to continue exploring Galar. If you pair a story like that alongside some of the interesting characters we've seen so far for Pokemon Sword and Shield, like for example Bede and Marnie, we're actually getting that competitive antagonistic rival, but then you have Marnie, who's something a little bit different from what we've seen before, and she's also being followed around by the evil team, Team Yell isn't the source for the main antagonist, it seems. A lot of people were actually speculating that could be Chairman Rose, who is actually the character who introduces you to the game, kind of like professors from previous games. People are speculating that maybe he could be the bad guy. So that's already perhaps a suggestion that the story for Pokemon Sword and Shield is going to be different, and maybe have some of the elements that I've been talking about. Sword and Shield also has other interesting characters like Hop and Leon seems to be reminiscent of some of the more cooler champions like Lance and Cynthia, who you see throughout your adventure, so that's also going to be pretty captivating as well. But if the story really does deliver, offer some twists and turns, and some themes that go beyond the typical scope of a Pokemon game, with some lingering effects that extend into the post-game, I think a story like that, with some really fun characters like Leon and Marnie and Bede, I think it could end up being one of the stronger stories for a Pokemon game that we've seen in a long time. But you see, the thing about stories is that they need moments. They need big moments that are really captivating, that really help to elate you and raise your energy and give you different feelings like sorrow and somberness and glee and excitement and maybe even a little bit of anger and rejection. Those feelings are really awesome to feel while you're experiencing a story. One element that helps to really drive those feelings is music. And Pokemon games pretty much always have really strong musical scores. We've already heard some really strong tunes already. One in particular that has me quite excited is that special song that was made by Toby Fox for this particular game. Toby Fox isn't actually someone who works for Gamefreak. He's responsible for Undertale, but his music is amazing. And this piece of music right here that you will be hearing throughout this video is also, for me at least, beautiful, and I can't wait to hear other amazing tracks like this one throughout Pokemon Sword and Shield. So hopefully most of the music in Sword and Shield holds up to this high quality standard we've seen from Pokemon games in the past. If it does that, I think definitely Sword and Shield will still be in line to be one of the stronger, if not the best Pokemon games in the series. Now, one thing that Sword and Shield definitely has a very clear advantage over previous Pokemon games are the graphics. Sure, some people are going to complain, some people are going to have different opinions. This is subjective after all, we have to look at it and decide if it looks good for us. But graphically speaking, from an objective perspective, these games will be the best running and have the highest resolution. We've seen a locked frame rate, which was not something that could be said about the previous generation. The game is in HD. An HD Pokemon game is also something that cannot be said about previous mainline generations. So from that perspective alone, these games obviously are better. But also the scope of them is better. We can see a lot more in the environment. The town seems to be a lot larger. The camera is a bit more dynamic. In fact, in the wild area, you can see the entire environment and you can move around. There's a lot more going on in the world, there's a lot more scope, and there's a lot more detail. So from that standpoint, Pokemon Sword and Shield graphically is already the best in the series. But when it comes to art style, there's obviously some debate there. In my opinion, the art style is very strong. I think we've seen some really great Pokemon designs. I think the world is beautiful. I have seen some leaks and I'm just going to say that it's nice. I'm not going to spoil anything here, just for the record. But from what we've heard from previews, there do seem to be a lot of details for Galar that are representative of the United Kingdom. It seems like for the environment of Pokemon Sword and Shield, Galar, Gamefreak has done their homework. And if these details hold through throughout the course of the entire game, I think that's definitely going to go a long ways towards delivering a very beautiful art style that is representative of the United Kingdom, that has a grander scope in terms of graphics compared to previous Pokemon games. Now, we could continue to talk about the story and the music and the art style and the graphics, but this is a game we're talking about at the end of the day. And for games, the most important thing is the gameplay. So for gameplay, how is Pokemon Sword and Shield going to deliver in a way where they will be considered to be some of the best in the series? One of the big additions to Pokemon Sword and Shield this time around is the wild area. The wild area is a large in scope area that is huge that you can explore. It's the first time we've had an open environment to explore in a Pokemon game. There's actually a camera that you can control and look around this time, just like other third-party adventure games, kind of like Zelda. That's the first time we've ever seen that in a Pokemon game, and while a lot of other games have had that mechanic, to have that in a Pokemon game is quite a big jump. But the wild area has a lot going on in it from what we've seen so far. There's a lot of roaming Pokemon, something that we wanted for a very long time. We saw it in Let's Go and it seems to have been improved upon in Pokemon Sword and Shield. But there's also random encounters as well, so it seems like there's quite a bit of a balance there. And we've seen other things as well, like being able to whistle at Pokemon, ride around the water, shake trees, go camping, go cooking, doing raid battles. These different things seem to offer a lot of variety to the open environment in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So if all these things come together, as previews have suggested, it's going to deliver a very fun experience that is sort of representative for what a lot of Pokemon fans have been wanting for a very long time. But I want to highlight the raid battles in the wild area. The raid battles offer varying difficulty. We've heard that there's difficulty that is even challenging for competitive players. So to see some challenge in a Pokemon game that goes beyond what you could expect from typical Pokemon games, that's very exciting. And on the note of difficulty, we've also heard that throughout the wild area, you can engage with Pokemon that are a very high level, even when you're at a very low level. So there does seem to be some things already added that will offer some challenge in these games. But when it comes to raid battles, you're going to be fighting Dynamax Pokemon, which are much larger, but they have a lot of HP and their attacks hit a lot harder. Basically, Gamefreak has finally offered boss battles in Pokemon, and that's pretty cool. But with the raid battles, you can play them with your friends. You can actually fight raid battles with your friends, and you could also roam around in the wild area with your friends and other players online. They're offering more multiplayer elements for this game, which is something that can't be said about previous Pokemon games, save for online battles and some online connectivity features. These games have co-op elements, and that's really exciting. But what makes it even more exciting is that these raid battles offer rewards. Some of these rewards are experience candies, which kind of brings me to my next point. There's a lot of quality of life changes in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now, these experience candies aren't rare candies, but they do something similar. They raise the level of your Pokemon. You can get varying levels of experience candies, and they can give you a lot more experience to the point where you can go up by more than one level. That's very convenient, but there's a number of other quality of life changes in Pokemon Sword and Shield that make the gameplay more convenient. We've heard that they streamlined the experience, the tutorials are not as long and overbearing, the game is not as hand-holdy as previous Pokemon games. We've seen that actually if you have a Pokemon that has really good stats, they're actually glowing yellow in the roaming environment. You can also change nicknames and delete moves and use a move tutor in every single Pokemon Center, which is also really convenient. But in terms of competitive elements, there are other changes as well. For example, you can actually use these mints that basically change the nature for your Pokemon. Not actually, but in terms of stats, they do. Effectively, there have been a lot of quality of life changes that make the experience for competitive players a lot easier to accomplish. You can create a competitive team from your base team. Creating a competitive Pokemon team in Pokémon Sword and Shield is going to be a lot easier than previous Pokemon games. But competitive aspects aside, it seems like Gamefreak has made efforts to make Sword and Shield a very seamless experience that flows well, that is not frustrating or annoying for returning players, and that's very exciting. I want to go back to the competitive aspect one more time though. We know that there's online battles, and we know there's a lot of quality of life changes, but what's interesting is that the way the entire game is put together, it seems to all sort of fit together perfectly, because you have all of these quality of life changes, but you also have the co-op mode, so you can go and play in the raid battles with your friends, get these experience candies that allow you to raise the level of your Pokemon a lot more easily compared to previous Pokemon games. You can use your playthrough team throughout a seamless experience, and you can use this team without worrying about, oh, these Pokemon won't be good enough for me when I want to get competitive and go into tournaments and play online. You can change around everything to make that Pokemon competitively viable. So between that and all the online features, Sword and Shield could be really strong. We haven't seen everything yet, so I am hoping that they do offer several different ways to play online that work really well, and if they manage that, that will go a long ways towards helping Sword and Shield to be considered the best in the series. Now, one thing I haven't talked about is the Pokemon. We know in Sword and Shield that there won't be as many Pokemon as previous games. We don't know quite how many yet, but the point is we know that not every Pokemon is going to be in this game. That said, we have seen some strong designs, and supposedly the point of not bringing every single Pokemon was to ensure a higher quality for this game overall. And for what I've seen so far, I feel like that's holding up. And if that's really the case, there should be other changes to the game that will ensure a more quality experience, a seamless experience that isn't hand-holdy, that has varying difficulty, that's grand in scope, and has a lot of interactivity. So while there may not be every single Pokemon in the game, I do hope that with the Pokemon that are there, they are great in quality, and there's a lot of different ways to interact with the Pokemon. From what we've seen so far, you can do the camping, and you can pet your Pokemon, you can go cooking, and you can see them in the roaming area, and there's several different ways to sort of interact with them within the wild area, so that's all very exciting. So I really hope that Gamefreak has continued to build upon that, and when we get to play these games in a week or so from the recording of this video, that all holds up, and the Pokemon in this game in terms of designs and the way we can interact with them are better than ever before. That will definitely go a long ways towards helping these games be the best in the series. Now, one thing I haven't talked about is lasting appeal. One thing that sort of held back some Pokemon games is the post-game. The post-game isn't always so extensive. We don't quite know what's going to happen in the post-game for Sword and Shield, but it has been suggested by Gamefreak that it will be a bit extensive, and if that's really the case, if this post-game is a bit deeper than previous Pokemon games, then that's obviously going to help these games to be considered to be really good. But if you consider that we know all about all these quality of life changes that really allow the game to be a lot more accessible for competitive play, that alone is going to offer a lot of replayability to the games, because that's going to actually help you get into the multiplayer for the game. And we've seen the co-op raid battles and the roaming Pokemon in the wild area and being able to do things in there as well. So if you couple a lot of competitive elements that is more accessible to more people, the online battles that are done really well, the raid battles that you can do with your friends, and an extensive post-game that offers some compelling story and different things to do in there, that all together could really help to facilitate a great lasting appeal and a strong post-game. So we take all these things together, a strong story with some twists and turns, compelling music comparable to previous Pokemon games, an art style that is aesthetically pleasing while still having a game that performs well at a high resolution, gameplay that is a bit fresh for the Pokemon series considering that we have the wild area with the roaming Pokemon, strong co-op play with the raid battles, and varying difficulty for beginning players and veteran players. A lot of quality of life changes that make the experience not hand-holdy and a seamless experience that allows the flow of the game to be fun and not taxing in any way, along with accessibility to competitive play, making it a lot easier to build a competitive Pokemon team with some really strong multiplayer elements, and a lot of different ways to interact with the Pokemon in the overworld along with a healthy post-game that offers great lasting appeal, Pokémon Sword and Shield could be considered the best in the series. And I want to stress one more time, these games are the biggest Pokemon games yet. This is the biggest team we've ever seen for a Pokemon game, and Gamefreak has said on multiple occasions that they are trying to make these games the biggest and best in the series. So we have heard recently that morale is low for Gamefreak considering all of the controversy, and while I understand not everyone may agree with some of the decisions that were made for Sword and Shield, the team is definitely trying here, and I really hope they succeed, because I'm a Pokemon fan, and I want the games to be great. And from what I'm seeing, I think they're actually going to accomplish their goal, to make this the biggest and best Pokemon games yet. Hopefully, I'm right, hopefully Game Freak is right. I guess we'll find out really soon. Anyways everyone, thank you so much for listening and watching. This is AndresRestart, and I'll see you all later. Take care. Bye.